Hello everyone, this is Torin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. In this particular battle, I will be playing the Warriors of Chaos, and I'm going to be facing off against a very aggressive Empire opponent who actually vanguard deployed several groups of Outriders here who are already taking pot shots at some of my Warriors of Chaos here on the front line, but thankfully for me, they are shielded, so it's not going to be that bad, and as you can see, they take their rounds pretty well, and they get back in line here, so could be much worse. If he was perhaps shooting these Marauders back here with great weapons, that would definitely be rough, so... Regardless, we'll do a quick rundown of my army composition while I'm getting shot at here, so hopefully it's not too distracting. I have a front line of Chaos Warriors. So these guys are pretty solid against the Empire, in my opinion. They're armored, very resilient. They have pretty high leadership with, give or take around 78. Fairly slow, but again, most of these type of infantry are, but pretty good melee attack, good melee defense, and they are shielded, which is very important because, again, the Empire will often bring missile units, although my opponent didn't really bring a lot of traditional missile units, but he does have all these Outriders, so I guess they're really paying their dues here. But I think my opponent wisely adjusted and started shooting at the Marauders, but we'll see here in a moment. So I have a front line of Chaos Warriors. I brought a group of Dragon Ogres, so I was kind of experimenting with them a little bit, and to be honest, I was fairly disappointed, but regardless, I figured they're anti-large, and perhaps with the group of Poison Hounds here, they would do pretty good against Demogryph Knights. I was hoping that would be my answer to his cavalry. In the secondary line, I do have the Chaos Warriors, but they do not have armor piercing themselves. So I wanted to have a secondary line of armor piercing troops so I could engage with the front line and then follow up with the armor piercing to really punch through. So I decided to go a more cost-effective route and go with Chaos Marauders with great weapons. So these troops are, relatively low-tier infantry, but regardless, I think with the Lore of Fire, I have a Chaos Sorcerer with fire back here. They could actually do pretty well for themselves. So I figured with this buff mechanic and the Flaming Sword of Ruin and the Cascading Fire Cloak, they could really buff these low-tier Chaos troops into pretty substantial threats here. So I decided to give that tactic a try. In the back line here, I have a group of Chaos Warriors with great weapons. So this is an equivocal tier unit to my front line. And then, of course, I brought a group of Chosen with great weapons. So I have my fodder, or not necessarily fodder per se. Chaos Warriors are very good, but that's my front line who's going to be absorbing. And then these troops will come through and do the piercing. So as you guys can see, the Warhounds are already engaging here. So thankfully, the Chaos Warhounds are very fast. If you take a look, they have 93 speed, as opposed to, granted, the Outriders are slowed at this point. So this group has 80. So the Hounds can indeed catch Outriders and usually will do very good against them. So that was definitely a nice... I kind of had them blended in with my front line, and I don't think he really was aware of their presence, and they ran right through and got a nice little engage. Then I have SIGVALD. I really like Prince SIGVALD, actually, as far as Chaos leadership goes. He's pretty cheap, so he allows you to, get more expensive infantry like Chosen and those type of things, as opposed to like Kolek or, the Chaos Lord on the mount with the potions and all that. He has a regeneration item, the Arc Armor, which gives him perpetual regeneration, which is pretty good if he takes like a big attack from a Gaze of Nagash or something like that early in the battle. He'll usually regenerate pretty well. And also he has charge defense against all, which is, if you look at the tooltip below, it's actually categorized as expert charge resistance, I believe, or something along those lines, where he negates the charge bonus of pretty much anything that attacks him. So it's quite good for helping him against hero sniping, because when they dive, he won't take that huge charge bonus. So regardless, my opponent's army, sorry, the battle's getting underway here, and I'm still talking my head off here, but he has 2 cannons back here. He has some spearmen, some halberdiers, which are decent. Chaos does bring large, Chaos spawn giants. Demogryph Knights with halberds. He has Davy Crockett, Amber Wizard here. Karl Franz, actually, on Pegasus, it looks like, so that's pretty cool. Then he's got cannons, which are good. They have armor piercing, and then, of course, the Outriders. So, well, let's go ahead and get started. Here we go. So he does an initial harassment with these Outriders, and thankfully for me, my Chaos Hounds were kind of blended in with my front line and were able to dash out. And they do apply a slowing poison, which is very nice. So I was able to break a group of Outriders almost instantly, which is very big because they're not the biggest investment, but against Chaos, these are very hard to deal with. Very hard. More often than not in these battles where they bring a lot of Outriders, I find that I just need to crack their main army and hope these guys just rout because of morale and army losses. So they're very annoying to deal with Chaos. They can usually just ride circles around you and just shoot at your units, and it's very unpleasant. So regardless, I'm advancing my front line. I got Prince SIGVALD out here. He got a little overambitious and decided to run out in front of his troops, but regardless, it's not a bad tactic to have him take initial missile fire, because with the Arc Armor, he will usually regenerate his HP, which is quite nice. So you can see the troops are advancing here. I have the shield line in the front, and hopefully they'll be able to take a decent amount of damage from his troops here, and then allow the armor-piercing troops to really engage. So he does bring Davy Crockett up here, and he uses a magic missile effect on these Chaos Warriors, which does a little bit of damage, takes a few of them out, but really was probably not worth it at the end of the day. He did summon a Manticore, which is now lurking above my army, and I noticed that he was trying to snipe out my Exalted Hero, so I go ahead and cover him with these Dragon Ogres, and they're going to get in there and do pretty decently. They do have anti-large, which is very good. Unfortunately for me, they're taking huge fire from those two cannons, so he's targeting them, and then with these Outriders and Flock of Doom, they're having a really, really bad time, and you can see they're already shaken. So my opponent is doing an excellent job of targeting those down. You can see the cannons are shooting at them, but the one thing is he invested in all of these Outriders and cannons and different units like that, and in doing that, he's going to have a very, very low-tier infantry corps. You know, he'll be able to do some decent damage, but Chaos troops are pretty heavily armored and pretty sturdy, so they'll be able to hold their own. So the Chaos Marauders are mixed in with the Chaos Warriors, and this is going to be a pretty good engagement for me. I should do pretty well here, and you guys can see I'm already buffed here with the Cascading Fire Cloak, which will give them armor piercing. Not that Halberdiers are the most heavily armored. They actually only have 30 armor, so regardless, it's still, you know, beneficial stat, and it also provides melee defense, which helps at the end of the day, so no complaints there. You can also see Prince SIGVALD is in here. He's doing some serious work. And that's another thing. I just have such a substantial front line, but I definitely knew I was going to lose the battle back here. You can see that not only were the Outriders shooting, and I tried to leave the Chosen back here to protect them, but Chosen are just so slow with 28 run speed, trying to keep up these Demogryph Knights, but you know, if they can get their paws on them, eventually they'll probably do pretty good, but you can see my Dragon Ogres just got absolutely annihilated. My opponent did such a good job, but regardless, at this point, I kind of just invested heavily in the front line, so I had SIGVALD in there, I have my Chaos Sorcerer with the Lure of Fire, and my troops are much stronger than my opponent's infantry line, so he does get a nice rear charge with these Demogryph Knights, and in response to that, I do use a Cascading Fire Cloak to buff my troops' melee defense, and look at the spread that gets. It hit these troops over here, it hit these guys over here. It gets a big, big group, so that was definitely very beneficial for me. So regardless, my Chosen finally catch up, and they're going to get in here and lay the beat down on these Demogryph Knights. Again, they don't have anti-large with the great weapons. They're not the Halberdiers, but they do have armor piercing, have very, very high combat stats, and these Demogryph Knights have essentially been sandwiched here, which is very, very tough for my opponent. So, but regardless, as far as the breakdown of the line goes, things are going pretty well for me. Over here, my Chaos Warriors, as well as these Chaos Marauders, they got in and just overwhelmed these Halberdiers, and you can see they're shaken, but fortunately for me, I'm still taking Outrider fire here, and there's, to be honest, not a lot I can do about it. In these kind of matchups, you just have to take that fire, because sometimes you can like sick a group to just occupy them, but regardless, there's not a whole lot I can do. And you can see my opponent's getting some great pot shots in the backs of these Chaos Marauders, but again, they're very cheap infantry, and you know, it's not something you should stress out about. So regardless, they're doing their part. Sadly, in a lot of these games, I actually just have to run the Outriders out of ammo, so they just have to engage you in melee. But the melee is going pretty well. SIGVALD's in here doing good. The Amber Wizard's taking some decent damage from the Chosen and the other troops, and you can see SIGVALD and the Chaos Sorcerer kind of have gotten a decent position here on Karl Franz. So Karl, he's a fairly resilient warrior himself, but with all of these troops, and you can see the Flaming Sword of Ruin was just on them, giving them that 22% weapon damage, and then just the constant buffing of the Cascading Fire Cloak. It's going to be hard for this Empire melee line to hold up, because he didn't bring greatswords, which are pretty good at holding up against Chaos troops with that armor piercing. He invested most of his resources in these Outriders, so at the end of the day, if these guys don't pay off and aren't able to clean up my army, he's really sacrificing a lot in his melee core. And you can see Karl Franz did take a bit of a beating from SIGVALD. You can see SIGVALD's over here with his Auric armor just doing some serious work, and most of the Empire troops have been cleaned up here, so that Lure of Fire can really make just these cheap Marauders into really cost-effective warriors, so definitely very, very happy about that. And also at the same time, my opponent brought a lot of Halberdiers and Spearmen, probably assuming that I was going to bring Anti-Large or Chaos Spawn or maybe even a Giant, and I didn't bring any of that. So a lot of those investments he made did not pay off, but regardless, the Outriders are doing really good. You can see they're just teeing off on my Chaos Warriors with great weapons here, and they're flying around and not having a good time. That guy actually got decapitated. So definitely not fun for my guys there, and a lot of them are kind of broken or running off here, but it looks like most of his troops are as well. So he does pull in his Demogryph Knights, and they're so low, and he's taking substantial army losses, so his troops are definitely on the verge of breaking. And I think at this point he actually brings Karl Franz back. I don't know did he already? No, Karl Franz is around here somewhere. Maybe he did land and get taken out. I don't recall exactly, but the Demogryph Knights are putting up their last stand here. They are wavering, and he also has his Feral Manticore, which is wavering, but it's doing really good work. And he still has very, very healthy groups of Outriders. He's got this group here who are still confident, and my troops are starting to get worn down. If you look at the attrition of this battle, I was able to easily win that melee core because, again, Chaos infantry are very, very strong and very hard to deal with, but Chaos can be taken advantage of in so many ways by units like Outriders and, you know, different types of Lords of Magic and all of that. But regardless, things are going well. This group of Outriders did run out of ammo and was forced to engage here, so that was definitely tough. And Chaos Sorcerer, he's a very, very strong melee combatant here, so he's leading these troops, and I believe he does provide encouragement as well, so that's definitely solid. So my opponent does land Karl Franz here, and you know, we're probably not going to end well for him, but that was all he had, and Karl just got taken out by SIGVALD. Definitely a tough end for him there, but he really didn't have much left, and I think his last hope was being able to take out SIGVALD, who was quite low, actually. I think SIGVALD was at, like, you know, 10%, so he dove in with the Manticore and Karl Franz and tried to take him out, but again, that's something that's really nice about SIGVALD. He has that charge resist against all, so when people try and dive in and just get that huge burst on him, he's very resilient against it, so something I like a lot about him. So just a quick breakdown of the army composition. SIGVALD did very well. He was embedded mostly in these Chaos Warriors and with great weapons and was among the troops, which is where you want him. Because one, that makes it a little harder to hero snipe him. Because if they dive him, they're going to get enveloped by all these really, really hard, heavy-hitting Chaos troops. So definitely like him for that. The Lore of Fire was great. It's just absolutely crumbles enemy infantry, but it's not that huge of an accomplishment in this particular game because my opponent did not bring a good infantry core. You can see he just brought some halberdiers and some spearmen, so very low tier infantry. Most of his resources were invested in a harassment type strategy with 4 groups of Outriders. And losing that first group to the Hounds was a huge problem. That was a huge setback because at the end of the game, if he had been able to keep that group of Outriders alive, you know, I could have lost that game. It was really close, and that definitely made a big difference there. And of course, the Dragon Ogres were just absolute garbage for me, but I also microed them poorly. So again, maybe if I had been a little more tactical with them. Of course, Chosen, huge investment, so you'd expect them to pay off, but they did quite well sandwiching those Demogryph Knights there. So good game to my opponent. He definitely did very well. It was just a tough matchup in terms of his infantry line and you know, all that type of stuff. And of course, Karl Franz he's really good, but you know, the General of the Empire with the potions is usually going to be a little bit of a safer bet. But again, I really like seeing these old school heroes like Karl and Papa SIGVALD over here doing pretty well. So good game there. I just want to thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate the support, and more content coming soon in the next few days. Take care, guys.